Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I'm thrilled to welcome someone who's been in the news quite a bit this year. He's a Harvard graduate, and we're going to discuss all about that, and a Jewish activist. Please help me welcome Shabbos Kestenbaum. Shabbos, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we have a lot to cover here, but I want to go back to your roots a little bit. So you grew up in Riverdale, right? I mean, I have good family friends who come from there, and it's a fairly Jewish area, and I'm assuming you came from an observant family?
Yep, I'm one of seven. I come from a modern Orthodox household. I'm actually a first-generation American. My parents are both from the UK, and although my dad has upbringings in the Chabad movement, they raised us to be modern Orthodox, and in particular to infuse our identity with American values and Jewish values, never really seeing the two as contradictory. On the contrary, they were quite complementary, and I grew up with a deep appreciation of both sets of identities.
It's fairly similar in background. So where did you go to school as a kid? Just here.
For middle school, I went to Yeshivat Noam. My claim to fame is I was the third or fourth graduating class there. And then for high school, I went to SAR, which is the main modern Orthodox high school in Riverdale, actually the only one. And then I went to Yeshiva in Israel for 2 years. I went to Aish Torah. Afterwards, I actually took a teaching position at SAR. I wanted to pursue a career in education, which I think probably motivated me to apply to Harvard Divinity School. But here we are.
Well, I'm curious, growing up, did you experience anti-Semitism at all? I mean, either in the neighborhood or to and from school?
Not once, never. And not only did I never experience anti-Semitism, but in fact, one of the reasons my dad at least came here is because he experienced anti-Semitism as a child growing up in the United Kingdom. And he hated this feeling of otherness, of feeling that you somehow don't belong in your own country. And he is a strong American patriot. He came here to start his own business, which operates to this day. And he was so proud and is so proud to be an American, never really questioning, as I said earlier, our Jewish identity. We had never experienced it once.
Wow. And so you applied to Harvard after school. So you applied there when you first got accepted. Like, what were your feelings? Like, prominent school, huge name. So, I mean, I'm assuming the sense of pride went through you at first.
Certainly. I will say when I was applying, I reached out to the four people who I knew had gone to a divinity school and were Orthodox. Three of them had gone to Harvard Divinity School. One had gone to Yale Divinity School. All four of them were women, and all four of them told me not to go.
Really? Oh, wow.
For some of the same reasons that I now will tell people not to go. Yeah, there was anti-Semitism. There's a bias against Israel. It's not intellectually rigorous. If you're an Orthodox male and you're interested in theology, simply go to a yeshiva and get rabbinic ordination. But I was willing, especially given my progressive political ideologies, I was willing and even eager to find myself in situations where I will be intellectually stimulated and I will be able to learn from many cultures and backgrounds and races. Had I known how pervasive and systemic it would be, I obviously wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was accepted, I actually found out I was accepted when I was in Auschwitz-Birkenau, which is maybe a story for another time. And they offered me a full scholarship plus a living stipend. So who can really turn that down? But unfortunately, as I said, that feeling of awe and wonder and excitement quickly disintegrated, certainly after October 7th, but well before then as well.
You already had some preconceived notions about how it was going to be. I mean, you had heard from other people not to go there. They told you that. So had you heard about anti-Semitism there? I mean, have you heard that about it was before you went?
Yeah. So as I said, the four people who told me not to go, they are from the Orthodox community, and they told me about instances of anti-Semitism, but broadly speaking, there was a much larger issue of this intellectual rot, whereby Israel is demonized, delegitimized, and there isn't particularly a space for an Orthodox Jewish voice. So if you read our lawsuit, we talk about instances of anti-Semitism well before October 7th, because there were instances. It was not the inescapable reality that it is now, but it certainly existed at Harvard Divinity School. But it was what I call this genteel anti-Semitism, a Jew hatred that you can sort of sweep under the rug, that you can make excuses for. And this is what these four women were trying to make me aware of. But me being obstinate and naive wasn't too interested in listening.
Well, after how long being did you start to see that? I mean, were you there long before it started to reveal itself?
I mean, I always give this example because I think it's pretty relevant. My first month of being a student, the Harvard Palestine Solidarity Committee invites Mohammed El-Kurd to speak for either the second or third time on campus. For those of you who don't know, Mohammed El-Kurd frequently appears on the Anti-Defamation League's top 10 anti-Semites. He's someone who professes that Jews eat the organs of Palestinians, that the Israeli occupying forces have internalized the ways of Nazi Germany. And for those who have the misfortune, like me, of being on Twitter, he lamented a couple months ago how sad it was that Palestinians can no longer hijack planes anymore. So we went to the administration. We said, well, why don't you simply apply the same logic you used on other minority groups with Jewish people? What do I mean by that? The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expressions, which is a free speech institution, they ranked 248 universities across this country as it pertains to free speech. How open are they to controversial speakers? How open are they to intellectual discourse? And Harvard was ranked 248th out of 248 universities. This is a university that regularly rescinds invitations to controversial speakers, that regularly disciplines and even expels students who are engaged in speech that is what they will call harmful or derogatory. Yet when it came to someone who was so openly anti-Semitic, and we went to the university about it, all of a sudden there was this double standard being applied of free speech, of the First Amendment, and forget about the fact that Harvard has no federal obligations under the First Amendment to do so, because it's a private institution. But fundamentally, they don't have a track record. They do not have a strong history of protecting the First Amendment. Harvard is only concerned about free speech if it is free speech that is being used to amplify Jew hatred. And I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but that is exactly what my experience was. And this is the first month of being a student there.
You know, you see it in everything. I mean, I'm coming from the literary publishing field, and it's always like, you know, we want to be inclusive, just not of you guys.
Yeah.
It's always the same. So were you in classes itself when you experienced, I mean, like this anti-Israel, like, you know, propaganda in classes themselves?
Yeah. So my first year of being at Harvard, I specifically took classes that went against my preconceived notions on Israel, that went against my ideology, because I wanted to be intellectually challenged. I wanted to be intellectually stimulated. But the biases and the lack of good faith from the other side were just so apparent. So I took classes called Religion, Nationalism, and Settler Colonialism, the case of Israel-Palestine. I joined what was essentially the Jews for Palestine Liberation for some of their events, not as a participant, but as an observer, someone who's willing to, you know, go into uncomfortable spaces. But as I said, there was really no willingness for that to be reciprocal.
Did you see anti-American, you know, teachings as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the best embodiment of the anti-Americanism is the fact that when I planted American flags, they were vandalized, the flagpoles were broken. I think that's the best indicator of it. But certainly, you know, the leaders of the Palestine Solidarity Committee, of the AFRA movement, which is a Black militant student club, I mean, they have said that, you know, the United States is the OG, is the original apartheid state. This is the outpost of settler colonialism. So the hatred of America runs pretty deep, and it starts in the classroom. Absolutely.
Did anyone, like, you know, does anyone ever object to these teachings? Has anyone student, or is it just like the intimidation factor is too strong?
Look, I don't want to make generalizations because there are many students here at Harvard. So some people will, some people won't. Certainly after October 7th, I was a lot more vocal, but beforehand, I would say generally I wasn't super vocal because I was there to get a good grade, to be liked. And the Israel thing was something I was able to sort of divert my attention from. Of course, this all changes on the night of October 7th, but even though Israel played a large role in campus activism and in the curriculum, as an individual, as the only Orthodox student at Harvard Divinity School, I sort of had bigger issues to worry about. I wanted to show, because fairly or unfairly, I was representing my community. For many people, this is the first kippah-wearing person they've ever met. So I wanted to be seen as a rational actor, as someone who is engaging in intellectual discourse in good faith. That was my main concern.
Let me ask about October 7th first. First of all, I mean, it happened on Simchat Torah. It happened on Shabbat. So, how did you find out about it? And what was your initial reaction that day?
I just remember, and it's funny because I always say it was the night of October 7th, but honestly, it probably wasn't. It was probably the night of October 8th or the night of October 6th, just because of the time zones. But when I first heard about what was happening in Israel, whatever date that it was, either the 6th, 7th, or 8th, I'm a young person, and I've never experienced Israel as an existential issue. Israel is where you go for Passover break. Israel is where you go to study in yeshiva. Israel is where you go to visit your grandparents. Israel is the land that you face when you pray 3 times a day, but you never consider its survivalhood to be in jeopardy. I was 5 or 6 during the Second Intifada. I don't remember it. I don't know what that was like. And for the first time in my life and in many young Jewish people's lives, we were confronted with this new reality that we were being immersed in quite quickly, which is Israel's existence, its very existence is in jeopardy. So we were at the Harvard Hillel, we were at the Harvard Chabad, and we were celebrating the Jewish joyous holiday of Simchas Torah. And these rumors began to circulate, and they persisted as the night went on, and they were strengthened. It wasn't just a bombing, it wasn't just a stabbing, it wasn't just a kidnapping, but it was lots of these things. It was all of these things. Mm-hmm. And so even though I'm a religious Jew and I don't use my phone on the Sabbath, for the very first time in my life, that's exactly what I did. To contact my loved ones, to make sure everyone was okay. And as I'm doing this, as dozens of Jewish students at Harvard are doing this, as thousands of Jewish students across the country are doing this, we had 34 student groups at Harvard University representing close to 1,000 students who knew exactly what was happening, who were seeing the images on their TV of kidnapped civilians, of burnt babies, of women bleeding from their private areas. And their reaction was to jump out of their beds to draft what they called an emergency statement to blame Jews for the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And don't take my word for it. This is not speculation or an exaggeration or hyperbole. The opening line of their statement reads, "We hold the Israeli the Israeli apartheid regime entirely responsible for all ongoing violence in the Middle East." That's how the statement began. So there's a straight line from MLK. We won't remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. The Jewish community at Harvard would be lucky if we simply had the silence of our friends, but we had the glee, the approval, the thunderous applause of our friends to the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
And this happened that day after?
Correct. No, well, hang on. No. This was happening the night of.
The night of.
The petition was being crafted and was being circulated the night of, and then it was published that morning. But students, their first reaction was to craft a statement.
Okay. So in the aftermath of October 7th, just what were things like in general on campus? Because I've had on other guests, and we've discussed this. It seems like these anti-Semitic, anti-Israel protests started immediately. It just felt so coordinated. So how did you see that all come together at Harvard? I mean, was it just instantaneous? Like the next day you started seeing the protests already?
Sure. So I don't want to be speculative. People often ask me, did groups have advanced knowledge and who knew what and when? I mean, I can speculate, but I try to deal with the facts and I try to deal with my experience. Within a week, I think it was October 11th or 12th, 1,000 students and professors rallied in Harvard Yard with their Palestinian flags, and Israel's an apartheid state, and Harvard invests in genocide banners. And a student gets up and he talks about that Hamas is not a terrorist organization. They will be looked up in about 10 years as freedom fighters, and we don't condemn the Palestinian resistance. And the reaction from the crowd was thunderous applause. Mm-hmm. So that was before Israel even began a ground invasion. That was before any real substantive response. So the reaction was immediate. It was well organized. It was well mobilized. And that began a period of real hatred and division and stupidity And I was quoted in the forward, which is just, a Jewish publication, which I'm not a big fan of, but I was quoted as saying that it was better for my mental health to be in an active war zone in the Middle East than to spend one more day on Harvard's campus. And that's exactly what I did. I bought a one-way ticket to Israel, and I spent about 2 weeks digging graves for soldiers who were killed, playing my guitar at hospitals for injured civilians, donating supplies to military bases, anything I could do to help. But more importantly, at least for my own psyche, anything I could do to get as far away from Harvard. And I didn't want to go back. I just felt that this moral rot is at the very center of the university. And I had professors, this did not get national attention, but I had professors from the Religion and Public Life Department who released their own statement, also within a week of October 7th. I think this was like October 11th. And the statement begins by saying the great Palestinian poet once said, and then it goes into talking about if you want to understand a narrative, you have to look at both sides. So if you start the story on October 7th and not the settler colonialism, not the illegal displacement of Palestinians, not on the apartheid, you'll only get one story. And forget about they refuse to condemn Hamas. They don't even mention Hamas. These are professors that I took classes with, or classes from, I should say. So it was at least at the divinity school, it was really an awful experience.
That's amazing to me. They're at the divinity school, and these are the people that's supposed to have compassion for others, and that this is going on. It's just incredible. So did you see any outside actors at play also, like people from non-students that just showed up to egg on or engage in the protests?
Again, I want to keep this conversation in facts and not speculative. I will say certainly there were outside, I wouldn't call them community members because I don't actually know where they came from, but there were outside actors who showed up. Mm-hmm. We talk about this in our lawsuit, but there was one case in particular where there was a rally going on at Harvard and a couple hundred people are protesting. And these are not just students, and many of them are wearing masks or keffiyehs to hide their identities. And somehow they're able to bypass security and they walk into Harvard Law School and they start banging on the windows. And we had Trump's former Middle East envoy, Jason Greenblatt, there. And Jewish students were removing their kippahs or locking the doors or turning the lights off. Oh. That's a major security issue. So there were non-Harvard students, non-Harvard affiliates who certainly played a large role in the protests.
Let me ask, so what was life in general for just the Jewish? I mean, you started talking about a little bit for just the Jewish students. Were you or them attacked verbally, physically by the other students?
Again, I always get in trouble because my ideological adversaries always say that I'm the self-appointed spokesman of the Jewish community at Harvard, which of course I've never said, mm-hmm. and I don't want to be, because the reality is the experience of Jewish students at Harvard is varied. And when I tell my story, there are some students who will say, this is not the university that I know. I had a very different experience. Certainly those who took part in the encampments will say there's no anti-Semitism. So I will tell you facts and I will tell you certain incidents. There was a Jewish student at Harvard who was spat on. There was a Jewish student who was assaulted at the Harvard Business School. There was an Israeli student who was told to leave class because her nationality made other people uncomfortable. In my case, there was a staff member who desecrated our hostage posters, challenged me to debate him as to whether Jews were behind 9/11, and then taunted me with a machete, so I had to have private armed security. Wow. Those are just 4 incidents. But does that mean that all of the student experiences was like that? No, of course not. But it was unfortunately way more than just one.
And you already said that the American flags were vandalized and you saw posters of the hostages being taken down.
It goes without saying, it was normalized that if you put up a hostage poster, whether it was at the Divinity School, whether it was at the Kennedy School, whether it was in the center of Harvard Yard, it went without saying that it would be torn down or vandalized or ripped within a couple of hours. That was accepted by the majority of the Jewish community, that when we put up the 1.5-year-old baby, Kfir Bibas, he would not be there in the morning.
So it's incredible to me. You already said that the professors were actively blaming Israel for their own massacre. So, and these are just incomprehensible. These professors are allowed to continue teaching. And Jewish students are being in there supposed to feel safe in the class. So you made your fears known. You report the incidents, and what was the response?
Nothing. Zero. No response. And that's why actually the judge ruled. We filed a lawsuit against Harvard in mid-January, and a judge ruled last week that our lawsuit will in fact go to trial. And the same judge dismissed a pretty similar lawsuit brought by two Jewish students at MIT. And whereas he dismissed the MIT lawsuit, he allowed ours to go to trial. Why? Because he recognized that Harvard did not respond to our complaints. In his own words, the facts as pled show that Harvard failed its Jewish students. I remember speaking in front of Congress in January, on the House Education Committee. And I said under oath on live TV in front of Congress that I had emailed the Anti-Semitism Task Force, which is a useless, meaningless organization led by self-hating Jews. And I emailed them more than 40 times to talk about what was happening. And they never responded to me once. Within a couple of hours of me saying that, all of a sudden I get a response from them. Oh, we're just so concerned. Thank you so much. So I email back and I say, well, are you responding to the students who don't have the privilege of testifying in front of Congress? I didn't get a response.
And you had Harvard employees also harass you or no?
I mean, I had this staff member who I mentioned.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say there was a coordinated campaign of harassment. There were professors who just stopped speaking to me. That was actually the overwhelming majority of professors at Harvard Divinity School just ignored me.
Huh.
But one of the things my lawyers always ask me is, how are your grades doing? Because if my grades were to take an unexpected nosedive, then that's retaliation. That's a second lawsuit. So that didn't happen, thank God. But it was very isolating. It was very lonely the last couple of months. I sort of was the proverbial nerd who sat alone at the lunch table. Such is the reality of being a Zionist, or just someone who doesn't believe in the destruction of the Jewish state, at Harvard Divinity School.
Did you reach out to the media at all at the time? Because, like, infuriatingly, the media for the most part had all the worst of the action, covered it, hit all the worst actions by the anti-Semitism on the campuses. So did you reach out to anyone there or no?
Initially, no, simply because I had no idea how to do it. I'm really good at studying, and I'm really good at writing papers, and I'm really good at research. I don't know how to do media. I don't know how to make speeches. I don't know how to be an activist. However, on the night of October 7th, when it became so clear that Harvard was fundamentally broken, I realized I had to change tactics. So I resorted to social media, which I really had zero experience in. Even now, I don't know how to properly use Instagram or Twitter. And I just began posting a couple of things, just calling attention to what was happening. And then media reached out to me because there was not a lot of people at Harvard within the Jewish community who were speaking out. And that is not a reflection on me being so brave and intelligent and articulate. I'm not, and I would very much love for other people to be more involved. But as the saying from the Ethics of Our Fathers goes, when there is a circumstance where there are no people, strive to be a person, strive to be a man. And that's what I tried doing. I just tried to fill a void, to advocate for the community and to point out what was happening. And then, people from the media were interested in highlighting my story. And then once I got comfortable with a couple of media appearances, then I would reach out with sort of, a scoop. I would reach out with a story saying, hey, no one knows about this. No one's covering it, but they really need to. So when I mentioned the staff member who vandalized our posters, so he vandalized them the night before the spring semester, saying Jews did 9/11. Jews are friends with Jeffrey Epstein. On Kfir Bibas, he had written, his head is still on, where's the evidence? And I had written to Harvard saying, what are you going to do about this? Because if you do nothing, I will spend my first day of the spring semester just tearing down these anti-Semitic posters. And they, of course, don't respond. So I realized, okay, they don't respond. I have to go on the media because that's the only way there will be change. So I reached out to Fox News and I'm on that night. And lo and behold, a couple hours later, Harvard releases a statement saying how they're just so, pained to see this or whatever.
And to be clear, you reached out to Claudine Gay directly.
Yeah, of course. Claudine Gay, Alan Garber, DEI, my own dean, Marla Frederick. I mean, these people are feckless, useless leaders, and I only hold them in the highest of contempt. I have nothing good to say about them. Actually, that's not true. I have one good thing to say about Claudine Gay, because due to her own stupidity, when she was asked about, the calling for the genocide of Jews Does that violate Harvard's rules on bullying and harassment? And when this moron said, oh, it depends on the context, that was actually so validating because it finally showed the world what I at least have been trying to say for months, which is we are treated qualitatively different than every other minority group. No, Shabbos, you're exaggerating. It can't be that bad. It's, people are concerned about the issue. But now when you have the president who has said in her own words, under oath on TV in front of Congress that you actually can call for the genocide of Jewish people depending on the context. It was sort of like, you see, I told you. So that's the one good thing she did. She inadvertently became the best advocate for the Jewish community at Harvard due to her own, as I said, intellectual challenges.
Watching, could you just believe? But it was highlighted. Lee Stefanik was the main one with that one. So while watching that, just what was going through you, like just utter disbelief?
Yeah, in the words of Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the Anti-Defamation League, shocked but not surprised. Shocked that she would actually say this, but not surprised because that really reflects the experience that I was going through. I would also add, and this is sort of a fun trivia, Stefanik herself said, this is a softball question, and I'll give you a second chance to respond. Right. That question was not meant to trick them up. This was not a gotcha question. This was meant to be an easy, yes, of course it violates. And then the follow-up was going to be, oh, if that's true, then, how come they call for the intifada or whatever? But the fact that they couldn't even get past the softball question is really, really revealing and shows a lack of intelligence, obviously, a lack of sympathy, a lack of morality. And I think it's a damn shame and a damning indictment that after this fiasco, the board of trustees at Harvard unanimously votes in support of her and refuse to hold her accountable.
Now, you've been outspoken about this for a while. So were there some fear on your part about being so outspoken about making waves, or some other Jewish students who asked you, please don't, because it's bad for them?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second part first. There have been many Jewish students who said, don't. You make it worse for us. Mm-hmm. Your experience is not my experience. And I get that, and I apologize to them, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to speak out. Because for every one person who says, please don't do this, there are two who call me and say, please share my story. So that's number one. In terms of the first part of the question, I've been getting death threats all the time since October 7th, from the far left and the far right. So clearly I'm doing the right thing if both sides don't like me. And I always say that if someone wants to throw a rock through my window, okay, I don't have a lot of money. It'll be, annoying to clean it up, but that's not on me. I didn't do anything wrong. I have nothing to apologize for, no one to apologize to. It's up to that assailant to be held accountable in the court of law and the court of public opinion. And so if someone wants to throw a rock through my window because I stood up for the Jewish people, what an honor. What an honor.
No, I think it's extremely commendable. But, something that you just mentioned. So reading about you, I see you grew up like most Jews, like fairly left leaning. I read that you even voted for Sanders. So it's like
twice.
Amazing. That's amazing to me, that part. So you're just about as close to the end of the left spectrum as you can go on that one. So so knowing that, what was your reaction to the government's, I guess response of lecturing Israel for the conflicts?
You're saying the Biden-Harris administration?
Yeah.
It's difficult because I try to be either nonpartisan or bipartisan. I'll put it this way. President Biden gave, I think, one of the best speeches of any president of the 21st century shortly after October 7th. Just absolutely incredible. He hit it out of the park, talking about why Israel is a necessity in a world of evil, talking about why he identifies with the Jewish cause, talking about how Jewish Americans have been at the fabric of American society from day one. Just absolutely exquisite, beautiful, meaningful, moving, excellent speech. I don't know who's advising him. I don't know what his inner circle is, but electoral politics unfortunately played a much larger role in decision-making than it should have. In the effort to not lose voters in Minnesota and of course in Michigan and even Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, they have made a series of policy blunders. That is not to discredit the real good that the administration has done. And we commend them for it. We applaud them for it. We recognize them for it. At the same time, the idea that somehow the moral imperative or the onus is on Israel to sit down with a terrorist dictatorial regime that burns babies to come to some understanding of a ceasefire deal, there can be no ceasefire with Hamas in power. And that seems to be an inability of the current administration to recognize that we can treat Hamas as rational political actors. And if we just sit down with them on August 15th in Doha, and if we could just, sign this agreement, if both sides could just, recognize the humanity in each of them, then we would be better off. I mean, that just fundamentally misunderstands the geopolitics of the Middle East, and in particular, what Hamas is. There was a ceasefire on October 6th. So the inability to recognize that, of course, the inability to secure the release of 8 American hostages after close to a year.
To me, yeah.
So it's bad. And I'm not, although I guess at this point I really have waded into electoral politics, but without saying who I'll put it this way. A senior figure from the conservative world was at a major Jewish conference, which I spoke at. And it was on the election and, what the Jewish vote will do. And she asked, reflecting Ronald Reagan's famous question, a very simple question. Jews, do you feel safer now than you did 4 years ago? And that was basically her entire speech. Just that, however many word question. And I think it's a pretty poignant and powerful question.
No, I agree. Your speech I thought was electrifying at that convention. And so I just want to know, did someone reach out to you to come there, or did you reach out to them?
No, the Trump campaign reached out to me.
Oh, and so did you get flack from anyone in like your friends, since you were fairly left-leaning ahead of time?
I got flack from everyone. It's impossible to appease people anymore. I made no one happy, which bothered me. Whatever.
Okay, at a certain point, you have to speak out on your experience as well, and do the right thing for.
And let me add, if the Democratic Convention wants me to speak, I would do it in a heartbeat.
That's what I was going to ask. Has anyone reached out to you from the DNC? No one.
No.
I think they're missing an opportunity. So I just want to know, like there too. So going back to Harvard, you did bring a lawsuit. We discussed briefly. So what finally prompted you to do that after all the things that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's worded well, because what finally prompted us to do it? We didn't want to do it. Yeah. we wanted to work with the administration. We wanted there to be internal policy corrections. But when you're screaming at the top of your lungs and no one's listening, you have to resort to different tactics. And when Harvard refuses to get out of its own way and enforce its own policies, you have to take drastic measures. So we filed the lawsuit mid-January after about 3 months of going through an almost parallel universe where truth doesn't matter, where Jewish students don't matter, where rules and regulations don't matter. I mean, I said this earlier, I can think of no more damning indictment on the state of higher education and the treatment of Jews at Harvard University that in order to receive equity, equality, and justice, we have to freaking sue them. I mean, how silly, how ridiculous, how irrational is that response? But it's a testament to how bad things have gotten.
I think even at the time, and that's what everyone's saying, that they don't care about Jews, they'll care about lawsuits. And that's
and I always say, I hope prospective students watch our case carefully. Yeah. I hope donors watch our case carefully. I hope politicians watch our case carefully, because while it's true, this is about me and the 5 other anonymous plaintiffs, this is also a powerful testament to the strength of the Jewish community, that we're not going anywhere. And we are going to use the civil rights afforded to us to hold our universities accountable.
So these things are not just going on at Harvard. They're going on at other campuses across the country, around the world. So did anyone reach out to you from other schools, any Jews from other schools?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, I'm part of a WhatsApp group now of a couple of dozen students from all over the country who are either involved in lawsuits against their university or are testifying in front of Congress or are going to the national media. So as I said, we're really good at studying and books and research. We're not really good at this because we've never done it before. So we help each other out. We provide tips and tricks. We connect people if they're looking to, I don't know, pursue a media outlets. So yeah, I've actually made pretty good friends through this process. There's a student, her name is Eden from Columbia, and I didn't know who she was pre-October 7th. We didn't run in the same circles. She's from LA. And through the process of simply being on a dozen panels together at 12 different organizations across the country, we've actually become good friends. And she's an excellent role model. She's a real hero, not just to Columbia University, but to Jewish students across college campuses. But it's a testament to how absurd the situation is that I've made good friends through the process of speaking across the country on how dangerous it is for Jewish students to be on their campus.
I think that's universal. I feel as much the same as you. I mean, I feel closer to the Jewish community than I've ever felt before in many regards right now. It's, even people I disagree with on every other thing, I feel close to them. So for people, what are you up to now personally?
Sure. So people can, follow me on social media. I'll plug that in. My Twitter is my first name, Shabbos, K, the letter. My Instagram is Shabbos Kest. So I try to post what I'm doing on those forums. But I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements, really, as I said, traveling across the country, getting the word out, eliciting help from the broader community of what they can do to help us and what they can do to fight back. So if there's anyone listening who would like me to speak and would like to help me, pay my monthly rent, by all means, get in touch. But that will be my effort for the next however long it takes.
And where will you be next?
Being an activist, and I'm keeping that intentionally vague because I don't exactly know what that means just yet. This is a new role that I'm figuring out for myself, but I'm very privileged that I've been afforded a platform, and I would like to use that platform to advocate for the community that I grew up in, the community that I know, and the community that I love. Now,
just to end this off now, what advice would you give Jewish students who are currently, I guess, struggling or having, to deal with anti-Semitism in the schools, or even to parents who are considering, where are they going to do with their kids?
Sure. So I'll preface my remarks by saying everything I'm about to say does not apply to Columbia University. I think Columbia is irredeemable. It's a pile of garbage, and there's no need for any students to go there, Jew or non-Jew. Now, having said that, my congressman, Richie Torres, makes this good point. He says, look, these morons on college campuses say Jews off our campus, Zionists off our campus. Why would we give them everything that they want? Why would we acquiesce to their demands and abandon those spaces? Especially if those spaces train the next generation of American leaders, which Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Columbia, they do. They really do. So we don't have the luxury of affording those spaces. At the same time, I was at the Christians United for Israel conference 2 weeks ago. And as I enter my hotel in DC, there's a gift basket waiting for me. And the gift basket is exclusively kosher food, and not just kosher food, but obscure kosher for Passover food, difficult things to acquire.
Amazing.
And these are obviously non-Jews. These are devout Christians. And they went out of their way to make sure that I felt included. So much of what we've been doing for the past 10 months is just fighting for basic dignity, just fighting for the bare minimum. And when I was at this Christians United for Israel conference, it suddenly dawned on me that there are people who don't just accept us and tolerate us, but love us and want us. Why would you want to send your kid to an institution where they have to continuously fight to be heard? Why not go to an institution like the University of Florida, like Duke, like Vanderbilt, that have said, we want Jewish students because we recognize you for the talents and the creativity and the passion that you have. And I think that's a really, really good argument to make. I don't think many parents want to be the first ones to do that and scorn Harvard for Vanderbilt. I don't think we're ready just yet, but I think it's a really good argument to be made.
Well, do want to thank you again for coming on. I mean, like I said, I've been an admirer of yours. I've been watching you, and I definitely commend you on everything that you're doing. And I really wish you luck in the lawsuits. I hope you really give it to them. But
Amen.
Again, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Take care. This has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. And again, a very special thanks to Shabbos Kestenbaum. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.